Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm Heavy D.
And yeah, this is Heavy D. We are not me.
Also known as Dad.
Dad, yeah.
And I'm going to tell a story.
Look what he looks like with no glasses.
But we don't need to do that, okay? Because then I can't see nothing. Actually, I can see nothing.
That's just reading glasses.
All right. So
we are going to be reading the Bible today. Then we are going to be doing the synopsis. Then we are going to be doing Mara. Please also write a picture of Mara.
yeah, I haven't gotten any pictures of Mara, and we're almost done with this book now.
And Becca,
well,
if you watch this video,
by almost done with this book.
I want you to do a picture of Mara and send it in.
We still have more than 80 pages.
I still want Becca to send it, maybe even Kim to do it, maybe even, let's say, Granny Bear.
Oh.
Granny Bear could do it.
Yeah.
Jessica could do it. Anybody.
Or I heard that Pop-Up has started listening sometimes too. Yeah.
Yay.
He listens because he's trying to fall asleep, and I just have that soothing voice that makes everybody fall asleep.
No. I think that's the opposite of your voice. I'm just kidding.
Dad, I think you're getting your voice mixed up with Howl's Moving Castle.
Okay, I have no idea what they're talking about. But anyway, JJ now is going to go on to his bed. All right, so I'm going to wait for JJ to get settled so that we can start the reading. Go with her where? No. 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 All right, we've got one person on. I'm not sure who that is. Yeah, but so nobody's actually watching outside of the house. So let me go down. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go down and I'm going to find out what can. All right. This is always the frustrating part because JJ is supposed to go to bed when we start the live stream. So.
Read.
Okay, I'm going to start with the Bible. This is the English Standard Version. We're on Ephesians 4. We are almost halfway through the General Electric Power Company. That's Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. So I hope you're enjoying the reading of the Bible. And if you're not, then maybe that's your problem. Okay, so that's Philippians, not Philippians, but Ephesians. Here it is. Chapter 4, which is right here. Therefore, now we have 3 people on. This is Ephesians chapter 4 from the English Standard Version. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore, it says, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives and he gave gifts to men. That's a quote from Psalm 68. In saying he ascended, what does it mean but that he also had descended into the lower regions of the earth, or lower regions of the earth? He who descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds and teachers. Sorry, the shepherds and teachers. Let me start that verse over again. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of our God, of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Now, I say this, or I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, due to their hardness of heart. They have become callous and have given themselves up to the sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. But that is not the way you learned Christ, assuming that you have heard about him and were taught in him, and the truth is in, or as the truth is in Jesus, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God, in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. That's the end of Ephesians chapter 4. One of my, oops, I lost my place. One of my all-time favorite chapters in the Bible. Has a lot of meat to unpack, just like all of these do. So there it is. At this time, if you're there, let me know that you're there. I see two people. If you're there, I want to hear from you. So please put a comment so I know who you are. All right, so here comes Kimberly with the synopsis.
So I know this is really unrelated, but JJ and I made cake today. Mom decreed that every Wednesday is random cake day. We're gonna have a lot of fun with that. But on to the synopsis. What happened in the last chapter was Mara, she accidentally, kind of accidentally, told her master, I keep forgetting his name, but honestly, Mara didn't know it till recently or something like that. Yeah, whatever his name is, I can't even pronounce it. But so basically, she told him the name of their the tavern or the inn where they meet for like their meetings and everything. So she's now like the spy for that place, and she's gonna go in there and see what's up, and she has to give him little bits of information. If she doesn't want to give too much, she'll have to give him some information. And then Chef 2, I remembered!
Yay!
Chef 2 successfully.
Now that we're almost done with the book, she's starting to remember the names of the characters.
Chef 2, he successfully robbed the king's tomb. Or he's in the middle of it. He's like halfway done with escaping.
He successfully robbed the king's tomb. They got past the guards.
Yeah, that's about it.
And they wound up having to kill one of them.
No, they didn't kill one, did they?
He tried to not kill him, but then he wound up having to.
Oh. Well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Alrighty. How you doing? Hey, Becca, what's up? Nice to hear from you. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, meant to text sooner. What? Becca. It literally says Becca. I can't read that. See, there it is. All right. So that is how you successfully convince your sister to join us in the live stream. There it is. All right. Chapter 18, by the dark river. It was an hour before the clang of shovels ceased. Tuftu was sitting on a rock, some yards away, was aware of eerie silence and raised his head. The torch flared wild and lonely against the night, revealing a gap in the rubble and a stone stairway leading downward into obscurity. At the top stood Judith and the sweating diggers, their eyes upon him. Slowly he rose and walked across the sands, taking the torch from the priest. At the bottom of the steps was the plastered over door, imprinted with the royal seal of the necropolis and the cartouche of the first Thutmose. A tremor passed through Sheftu at sight of the familiar hieroglyphs of the old king's name enclosed in their oval line. He and the prince had stood on this spot long ago, on the day of the entombment, to see that seal pressed into the wet plaster. His lips parted, but it was moments before he could force himself to speak. Not even thy prince should demand such a crime. Open it, he said. The diggers crept past him down the steps. Under their chisels, the plaster crumbled in an irregular crack, gradually outlining the door. At his elbow, Judith was whispering, Anubis, strike us not. We have plaster to mend it. We bear the royal seal. All shall be as it was when we have gone. Sheftu found it hard to breathe. The portal, which was to have remained closed and inviolate for 3,000 years, was swinging open before him with a creak that woke echoes far back in the depths of the tomb. A breath of stale, dry air drifted out and enveloped him. Slowly, every step an act of will, he descended the stairs and passed through the door into the habitation of the dead. He stood in a tiny entry where the stone floor was strewn with flowers. He remembered them, the last offering of the funeral party returning to the upper world. They looked only a little withered, as if no more than a week had passed since they were dropped here. But when he touched one with his toe, it fell into dust so fine there was no trace left. Shivering a little, he raised the torch. Pleading texts from the Book of the Dead leapt at him from the close cavern walls. I have not committed iniquity against men. I have not oppressed the poor. I have not starved any man. I have not made any to weep. I have not committed that which is an abomination to the gods. I have not turned back the water in its season. I have not put out the fire in its time. Since I know the names of the gods who are with thee in the hall of double truth, save thou me from them, Osiris. I am pure, I am pure, I am pure, I am pure. Before Sheftu, another flight of steps led downward into darkness, with Jedit pressing at his side and the diggers with their baskets crowding at his heels. He started the long descent. Down, down, down they crept into night so black the torch was but a moving spark, I almost said speck, into the silence so deep the ears rang with it. Staler and more oppressive grew the air, the same air left here years ago when the outer door was shut and sealed. Was there enough for 4 men breathing hard with fear? Sweat masked Sheftu's face only to evaporate instantly in the shriveling dryness of the place, drawing his skin and stiffening his lips. In vain he tried to keep his mind away from the thought of the millions of tons of rock and earth above them. The deeper they went, the more ponderous grew the weight, the more stifling his awareness of it. The steps ended at last in the depths of the earth. The men stopped a moment, hearing their own breathing loud in the silence. All were loath to leave the stair, which now seemed known and safe. Sheftu's thoughts flashed back to the guard lying so still under the stars far above them, and to the guard's comrades at the valley entrance who might be starting to search for him, wondering why he had not returned. A sense of urgency possessed Sheftu. They must hasten, or the alarm would be raised and they'd crawl out at last into a trap. Fighting his reluctance, he led the way out across a stony floor, one pace, then another, then a third, with the light flickering into the black void. Suddenly, a vivid figure, twice the height of a man, sprang out of the gloom. The trespassers recoiled as at the trespassers recoiled as at a blow, and a sound that was half grunt, half moan broke from the digger Usur. It was some seconds before Sheftu could bring himself to raise the torch and discover that the terrifying figure was one of a procession painted along the walls of what appeared to be a lofty and spacious corridor. Sheftu forced himself to steadiness, to memory of this corridor from the day of the old king's entombment. Then, gripping the torch, he started down the long hall. More and more brilliantly painted figures slid past them in the wavering light. A group of women bent in mourning with disheveled hair, slaves bearing treasure boxes and furniture, dignitaries pacing behind a canopied sledge, excuse me, on which rested a great sarcophagus. It was the old Pharaoh's funeral procession, depicted faithfully in every detail, climaxed at the far end of the hall by the last solemn ritual of the opening of the mouth. There, framing the door, rose the painted figure of a Sem priest with his mystic tool, while opposite him the jackal-headed god Anubis supported the mummy. Jedit began to chant in a low, unsteady monotone, in peace, unto the great God. Proceed in peace, unto thy tomb in the necropolis, in peace, unto the land of the west, and thy dwelling on the dark Nile. His voice sounded thin and strange in the heavy stillness. The torch and its huddled bearers moved between the towering figures and under the lintel of the door. Before them lay more stairs leading down, always downward and inward into darker mystery, thicker silence. In peace, in peace. The priest's voice was a thread of sound, now muffled against the narrow sides of the stair, now hollow and unreal across a passage, rippling as a torchlight rippled along the caravan walls. It was as if he could not stop, though the monotony of it beat like little hammers upon Sheftu's brain. He himself was concentrating fiercely, racking his memory at every point where the passage branched. The branching seemed numberless, and only one was right. The others would lead to pitfalls or blind alleys, traps of confusion set by the old king's architects for just such intruders as they. Each time Sheftu forced himself to pause, choose painstakingly before leading on. He tried to quicken his pace, nagged by the thought of the guard, by the craving to turn back, dragged at his feet in spite of him. In peace, unto the land of the West. They had come to a doorway. Across its threshold lay the first storeroom, a large chamber crowded beyond the reach of the smoky light with the possessions of the dead. Here were chariots, dismantled and stacked along one wall. There a great golden couch, an ebony throne, everywhere carven chairs and tables, stools, headrests, chests, and boxes of clothing, all moveless, but somehow waiting. The torch flickered in the still, dead air, but when Sheftu slowly extended it, the walls came alive with rows of painted servants, copper-skinned, white-clad, bearing trays of fruit and meat, jars of wine, platters of bread. Sheftu stared up at them. It was here the house of the king began in earnest, and these were his servants. Sheftu knew well they were no longer the mere painted outlines they had been on that day long ago when he had walked here grieving beside the prince, when the air was still heavy with the funerary myrrh and flowers, the priests still droning. The moment the wine of the last libation had dried upon the floor and the silent dark closed in, these figures had been transformed, transmuted, quickened with that mysterious other life which called their cause out of the paint and plaster to be the wraith-like servants of the dead king. Sheftu shivered. What right had he, the living, to look upon them now? "Allow us to pass, O Ka of the Pharaoh," he whispered. "We leave undisturbed your furniture and linen. We leave you slaves to serve you, your chariots to carry you through the shining streets." Jedid's mumbling grew more urgent. In peace, unto the great God. Proceed in peace unto the tomb in the necropolis. In peace, in peace. Through that chamber and the next they moved, while awareness of the dead king grew always stronger as the torchlight shone over more and more of his possessions. His presence was everywhere about them now, in the jars of honey and unguents sealed with his cartouche, in the shelves bearing his favorite joints of meat, in the sandals he had worn, the spear he had flung, the tiny boxes that held his eye paint. Every step led them nearer to him. On the walls were his fowlers and herdsmen, his fishermen dragging in their brimming nets, men threshing his grain, or pressing out his wine, or fashioning his golden collars, all workers laboring ceaselessly for the royal Ka, all shocked motionless by the desecrating glare of the torch and the footsteps of living men. Sheftu's lips were parched, his nerves taut as bowstrings. Was the thin air growing harder to breathe, or were the angry hands of the Kefs squeezing at his lungs? An eternity must have passed since they left the starry night far, far above. Jedit touched his arm suddenly. Ahead lay a door, the final door, for golden statues of the goddess Isis guarded it on either side. They shone fiercely yellow in the torchlight as the intruders drew nearer. They blinded the eye with their hot glitter, but they did not strike. Sheftu heard the harsh breathing of Usur behind him as they passed under the upraised staffs and across the threshold of the last and holiest chamber, the heart of the tomb. There they stopped. Even Jedid's chanting ceased at last. Profound and utter silence closed over them as they stood amid a still magnificence. The room was filled with treasure. Everywhere, coffers, chests, carven boxes spilled it out upon the floor. Jewels and satin ebony, ivory, pale electrum, tall alabaster vases hollowed to fragile translucence. But above all, gold, yellow gold that winked and gleamed and glinted from every corner of the chamber. At first, Sheftu could see nothing else. Half dazzled, he dragged his eyes from the glitter. Before him, a path had been swept clean through the rich profusion. At its end, two life-size statues of maidens stood 1 foot advanced. Their dresses shimmered with silver and carnelian, and they held baskets of foodstuffs in their golden arms. These were the gentle Ushapti, closet guardians of the king. They were radiant in the light, with their shining brows and their ageless eyes of lapis lazuli. Between them loomed the huge sarcophagus, veiled by a linen pall so sheer and pink granite showed through its folds. The pink granite showed through its folds. On the wall behind it, the great god Osiris himself welcomed the king's soul to paradise, while on the other walls a host of deities in mystic headdresses were lined in overpowering grandeur. Sheftu sank to his knees, no longer able to withstand his awe. He felt all sense of time and memory fade away, all objects blur except the tranquil faces of the Ushapti and the sarcophagus they guarded. Here was the ultimate moment, perhaps his last, for he was in the presence of the dead. A strange rustling sound in his ears. Was it the Keph's dark wings, or the thundering of his own heart? Nay, it was neither. Sheftu's mind sprang awake, full of the stealthy shuffle of palm leaf sandals. Usur, the digger, was creeping past him, his profile rigid, his gaze fixed, unswerving on the golden statues. He held a rock on his upraised hand. In a flash, Sheftu knew his purpose. He meant to smash the eyes of the Ushapti, so they could not watch what was to come. Sheftu leapt for him, struggling to wrest the weapon from his hand. The man made no sound, but his strength was terrible. In utter silence, the two strained together, while the light flickered and danced crazily upon the walls. Hampered by the torch, Sheftu was already sinking to his knees in the moment it took for Camus and the Camus and the priest to overpower Usur and pin him fast. Sheftu staggered to his feet and seized the rock, holding it poised over his sweating victim's forehead in a fist that trembled with longing to smash it down. "Stay thy hand, my lord," came Jedid's low voice. "Not every man can bear his face." Slowly, Sheftu's arm came down. His fury faded. It was true. He could not have borne his own tonight, save for the purpose which so consumed him that he could give heed to nothing else. He shook his head, trying to steady his thoughts. This Usur was a sound enough fellow in the world of daylight, a weaver, well respected, and as courageous as the next one. But what man was prepared to defy the very gods? It was not this man who broke that was surprising. It was his companion who still held staunch. In wonder, Sheftu turned to Camus and saw the answer written on his broad and humble face. It was Shishai, who Camus followed with blind devotion, though he led straight into the land of darkness. Sheftu put a hand on the massive shoulder, then turned to Usur. "Do not touch the Ushapti. You must not blind the guardians of Pharaoh and leave him defenseless against his enemies. We come here not to rob, but to rescue Egypt. Do you understand? The gods have not yet struck us, and perhaps they will not." He motioned Jedid to loose the man, suddenly feeling so weary He could scarcely stand. Much still lay ahead. There was the treasure to sort, their funerary offerings to set out in place of the gold they took, the baskets to fill and carry through all the rooms and along the stairs and passages back to the upper world, then the outer door to plaster over and mark with the royal seal. Aye, and what of the guard? Before they sealed the door, they would have to carry him down into the first little flower-strewn chamber. The ways of the gods were strange. This common guard, distinguished by naught save stubbornness, had exchanged his life for Egypt's, and would sleep forever on the doorstep of royalty, unless, of course, he had been missed by his comrades. The thought prodded Sheftu's tired mind once more. "Make haste," he muttered. "Pick out the heaviest gold." He never knew how long they had labored there below the towering images of the gods, weighing the treasure in their palms, packing the massive cups and crowns and chains and collars in the bottom of the baskets, the jewels and necklaces on top. For Sheftu, their work took on the unreality of a fevered dream, in which only the cold weight of gold and the sound of labored breathing went on, unchanging. He was near exhaustion. The struggle with Usur had nearly drained his strength, already taxed by days of strain and a night of unbearable tensions. His anxieties swirled about him. The guard, the passing of time, the uncertainty of getting out of the valley, and above all, the deep hatred of what he was doing. Every move he made, every cup and goblet he plucked from its place, did violence to a lifetime of stern teaching. But it is not for ourselves, it is for the king, he told himself. Better we die than Egypt. Mother of truth, how hard it was to breathe. Sheftu dragged himself erect, a gold chain dripping from his hand, and frowned toward the stone urn into which he had thrust the torch. The flame burned murky and uneven. Was it nearly used up, or had their hungry lungs consumed the air it too required to live? "Camus, light a fresh torch," ordered Sheftu. The big man straightened, stared blankly at the torch, then paled. "Master," he whispered, "we did not bring another." The room grew painfully still. Every mind was filling with a new fear, so fundamental that it swallowed all the rest. The fear of the dark. Here below the earth, darkness was total, absolute, unnatural. They remembered too well how it had followed and surrounded them through the whole descent, a formless monster held at bay only by their tiny flame. They remembered the black labyrinth awaiting them now, the windings, the echoing halls, the stairways, the lonely passages that led nowhere, through which they must journey back. There was a low moan from Usur. The wildness was coming over him again, and Sheftu lashed his tired will to combat it. No matter. His voice sounded strange. Excuse me. He fought to steady it, though his tongue felt thick and numb. This one will do, but there is little air left here. Hurry! To his relief, the need for haste submerged Usur's panic. They fell upon the gold with redoubled effort, but Sheftu's eyes slid back to the torch. Perhaps it was only air it lacked. Perhaps it would burn bright again when they left this chamber where they had worked and breathed too long. The baskets were nearly full now. The room, stripped of its glitter, looked stark and somber. You must take what is his, even to the royal cobra and the collar of amulets. Sheftu's head throbbed. He turned slowly to the sarcophagus, running his tongue over his lips without changing their dryness. Be ruthless. It must be done, he told himself. He beckoned Jedit with a faint jerk of his head. Together they hurried down the clean-swept path, past the Ushabti, to the spreading edge of the pall. Sheftu lifted it grimly, afraid to pause an instant. Avoiding each other's eyes, the two men seized the heavy lid and struggled to turn it diagonally on its base. It would not budge. "Sir, come yes!" Jedit panted. The diggers came, laid hold. Nothing mattered now but haste. The dying torch, the dark. Under the straining of the 8 strong arms, the thick slab grated, inched outward with a horrid grinding of stone on stone, and turned at last to lay open a triangular area at its head. The torch was guttering lower and lower. Sheftu did not look upon the dead king's face, but plunged his arms blindly into the dark cavity of the coffin. They came out laden with solid gold amulets worth a prince's ransom. He forced himself to grope once more, to find the heavy circlet with its golden cobra that bound the forehead. He drew it forth, shining and cold. "Now," he whispered. Once more the shoulders strained in frantic haste. The torch sputtered feebly, winked. The lid grated into place. Sheftu flung the pall across it, sprang with the others for the baskets and the torch. They fled, their starved lungs dragging at the air. Through the doorway, beneath the upraised golden staffs of the twin Isis statues, in and out among the furniture and piles of weapons that littered the floor, on into the next chamber, past the painted fishermen, the threshers, the endless shelves of goods, down a passage and up 3 stairs and on. Nay, wait. Sheftu halted, panting. He thrust out the torch, staring at the walls ahead of him, the stairs behind. The light shone dully across the opening of a second passage. This way. He swerved into it, all his flesh crawling. It would have been so easy to miss it altogether. He must go more slowly, be sure that every turn was right. But if he lagged, what of the torch? He looked up at it anxiously. The air seemed better now, but still the flame sank. It was not the lack of air then. The torch itself was all but gone. Faster, faster, but take care! One of the diggers stumbled on the threshold, and his heavy basket lurched sideways, spilling a stream of gold. With a curse, Sheftu was on his knees, scooping up chains and amulets, a fragile bracelet, a necklace ornamented with golden bees. "Leave it," gasped Jedit, himself snatching up a handful or two and stuffing them into the basket. "Leave the rest. Go on." Sheftu groped once more, swept a fortune into a fold of his cloak, and left another where it lay as he staggered to his feet. They fled on past the pile of dismantled chariots and the great couches, away from the mysterious painted presences of the servants on the walls, through a corridor, around a murky bend. The gloom swept closer suddenly, loomed like a monster over them. Sheftu stopped, unable to see the passage at his feet. All eyes went to the torch, just as the last flame sickened and dropped to nothing. A red coal glowed on for a moment, deepened to crimson as the swirling dark closed in, then died. Blackness engulfed them. Chapter 19, Fatal Mistake. The first word is the or the, and let's go for it. Ready? Who's ready? JJ? I already said the first word. Are you ready? Are you listening?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Mom's listening on her headphones. Cool.
Well, now I'm caught up. No.
All right. So, chapter 19, Fatal Mistake. The big common room of the Inn of the Falcon blazed with light and resounded to the usual clatter of crockery and conversation. Though it was well past midnight, ashore was still waddling here and there with platters of stew, mugs of keyed beer, and the jugglers' balls wove a glittering pattern in the air before one of the larger and more boisterous cubicles. Mara sat alone in the booth at the far corner, slowly twisting the ring which winked up at her mockingly from one finger. A cup of wine stood untouched on the low table before her. It was stale. Oh, sorry. I got distracted by myself. A cup of wine stood untouched on the low table before her. It was stale. Its flecks of dust had gathered on its surface. She had been waiting for Sheftu since the mark of 7. 5 weary hours. The torch flames dipped in a gust of air, and she started up quickly, glancing toward the entryway door, but it was only Nakonk who appeared there. For the third time in as many hours, she sank back upon her mat as he lumbered across the floor toward her. Seen naught of him yet, I suppose, he grunted, sagging in the entrance of her booth. She shook her head, and he ran a hand warily over his stubby jaw and up under his wig. By Amun, I'm about at the end of my hawser. He should have been back by Conk. He'll not come back. Something's happened. I doubt we ever know what, but something's gone wrong. You mean to give up, do you? I'll wait a bit longer, but it's folly, you know that. Nakonk slapped his wig back into place and scowled down at her. Perhaps I do, but he bade me stand by no sail He bade me stand by to sail sometime tonight, and the night's not done yet. I'll wager he's not either. I've yet to see the snares the shy can't wriggle out of one way or another. Nakonk, do you know where he is this time? Is JJ supposed to be in the doorway? No, Mom says no. He says he's waiting for Mom. Okay, go lay down while you're waiting. Wow, I said okay, and Google heard it. All right. Nakonk, do you know where he is this time? The captain shook his head uneasily. Nay, he doesn't tell me everything, maid. I presume it's dangerous. Aye, it's dangerous. He was 10,000 kinds of a fool to attempt such a thing. That's how dangerous it is. Aye, well, now don't look so, little one. It may be all well. All will come out right yet. Patting her shoulder abstractedly, Nakonk glanced toward the door. I'd best be starting back. If he should come, with me not there to take charge of that cargo. He hurried away, his big shoulders drooping. The torch flames dipped once again as he went out. Mara sat on, with her legs cramped and numbing under her, swirling the dusty wine in her cup. Finally, she, too, rose, groped for her discarded sandals, and slipped them on. Then she flung her cloak about her and wandered slowly across the room. As she passed the fire-pan, Miftaya's thin, strong fingers reached out to clutch her arm. Where is he? Whispered the old woman fiercely. You know, don't you? Why is he so late? Mistress, I can't tell you all I know, but only he knows what's keeping him. You could give me some notion if you would. One word as to when he'll be here? I've told you, I know not. Mara jerked free. It may be he'll never be here. It may be. Something in Miss Taya's face cut her short, a curious puckering. She realized suddenly that the old woman's eyes were glassy with tears. Mara bit her lip, and, moving closer, touched the tense shoulder. Mistress, my heart is with yours. I'd comfort you if I could. The unexpected sympathy was almost too much for Miftaya. She pressed a skinny hand to her lips, half turning away. For a moment, painful to both of them, she struggled visibly to gain control of herself. Then her hand slid from her mouth down to her strange shell necklace, and her face settled stiffly into its usual network of wrinkles. We will not give up, blue-eyed one. He will come. Aye, he will come. The lie tasted bitter on Mara's tongue. Turning abruptly, she went on across the room. The courtyard was still empty of everything but moonlight, and even that seemed dim and spiritless. Mara stood on the doorstep a moment with the torch sputtering behind her, then turned back into the inn. She would order a plate of stew, and if he had not come by the time she had eaten it, fool, she told herself angrily as she settled down again in her cubicle. Why do you keep hoping? He's lost. You'll never know what happened. She could not eat the food Ashur brought her any more than she could answer the anxious, unspoken question in his face. She sat toying with the big chunks of meat. It mattered little now what she told her master. She would tell him everything. Without Sheftu, the king was ruined. No one else could possibly. Oh, Mother of Truth, why had she ever met him? For a moment she longed to turn time back, undo everything, even go back to the fluting irons and Tita's familiar scolding. She flung the spoon down, then stiffened as a shadow fell across her. The juggler, Suhure, was leaning in the entrance to the cubicle, smiling his twisted smile. Three gilded balls circled furtively above his head. Live forever, face of the lily, he greeted her. Thou'rt long alone tonight. Where is our friend Sashai? I know not. Begone. Mara picked up her spoon and started eating. Strange, purred Sahure. Often he comes here when you do not, but never before have I seen you save at his side. Mara glared at him, but preserved a stubborn silence. The maid of mystery, the juggler went on dreamily, invisible to poor mortals save in the hours of darkness, in this one spot. Where do you hide in the daytime, eye of the turquoise, that my heart is never gladdened by your countenance, whether in the marketplace or the villas of the great ones? That is none of your affair. Mara pushed her plate away, seething. You take my appetite, juggler. Be off with you. He only smiled. With an air of unpleasant leisure, he shifted his crooked body, and the balls danced lightly to the other hand. Aye, one must be discreet, and you are the very flower of discretion, are you not, lovely one? Not a word have you said about your troubles tonight, though it's obvious they weigh heavy on you. Suddenly he bent close to her, his breath in her ear. Where is he? He is late. You may trust me, I am in his confidence, like you. Pushing him away, Mara scrambled to her feet, swatting his golden balls in every direction and spitting a stream of invective, which included several Babylonian phrases Inanni could never have heard of. Get thee gone, I said, you son of 40 devils. I'll not listen to your cursed babble. Be off, be gone. She broke off, breathless, aware that every head in the inn had whirled toward her. There was a pause, then Suhure picked up his gilded balls with a faint shrug, drifted away across the room. Mara drew a long breath and eased down upon the mat. Trust that keft man, as well trust the red-haired set himself. It's only curiosity, Sheftu had said. He's loyal, aye, perhaps, and perhaps his loyalty was not as freely for sale as onions in the marketplace, but she doubted it. Still trembling a little, she watched him coolly begin his juggling again in another corner. Why, she reflected, should I not admire this rogue instead of hating him? He seeks only to know which barrel holds the fish, and have I not always lived thus? Nevertheless, I do hate him, and what's more, I'm afraid of him. I forget him, she told herself wearily. Forget all of it. Nothing was to be gained by sitting here longer. She reached for her cloak and rose, moved for the last time through the din of tambourine and conversation and the thick smell of meat into the chill, fresh wind of night. But this time the courtyard was not empty. Even as she left the torch behind and started across the dark pavements, she heard the click of the gate and saw the tall, cloaked figure just inside it. She stood one moment in startled disbelief. Then, with a cry, She darted toward him, stumbling on the uneven ground, reaching out to make sure Chef knew. He was no wraith. He had come. He was here. She felt relief so intense it made her almost dizzy. Mother of truth, what kept you? What kept you? I thought you were dead. So did I, little one, he whispered. He was leaning against the wall as if too weary to stand. She put out her hand to touch him, but hesitated, awestruck by where he had been and what he had done since she saw him last. Sheftu, are you well? I'm well enough. But something went amiss. Everything. Mara, our torch burned out. Burned out? Before you. As we were leaving the inner chambers. Mara felt gooseflesh crawl up her arms as the full meaning of that came home to her. Osiris, she whispered. She drew her cloak about her, shivering. We tried every passage, some of them twice, 3 times, Amun. It seemed years. We ended up stumbling on the right one, sheer chance. It was a moment before she could make her mind go on to anything else. Then she lifted her head quickly. But you were successful. You brought the gold? All we could carry. Then it's done. It's finished and over. Aye, it's finished. Mara drew a long, shaky breath. And you're back safe. Do you swear all's well with you, Sheftu? Come where I can see you. It's so dark. Dark? The courtyard dark? Merciful Amun, you know nothing of the dark. Nay, perhaps I don't, but I can't see you. He was quiet a moment, then he spoke in a different tone, very softly. I can see you, as clear as in the sun. He lifted one hand and touched her cheek, the lotus in her hair. Suddenly he pushed away from the wall and gathered her in his arms. I believed I would never see you again, he whispered. For 5 hours I believed that. Ah, Mara, what a difference 5 hours can make in the way a man thinks. He's going to kiss me, she thought. He can't help it. He must, he must. Sheftu, she breathed. It would have been hard then, never to see me again. He twined his fingers in her thick hair and, pulling her head back, looked down into her face. Then, murmuring something under his breath, he set his mouth against hers, hard. Triumph swept over Mara, giving way immediately to something so much stronger and deeper than every other reality dropped away. She found herself clinging to him fiercely, caught up in an emotion more compelling than any she had ever known. For once she did not plan or scheme or use her wits, since it was quite impossible. She did not even think. It was a long time before he released her reluctantly and pulled her head onto his shoulder. The minutes went by, and Mara drifted back slowly to the ordinary Egyptian night, the courtyard, and cold reality. She was a little frightened. What was it that had happened in that space of one kiss? This was not something she could play with as she chose. Nay, it was quite the opposite. His arms still held her. She became aware of them as a separate sensation, like the rough linen of his headcloth against her cheek, like the pebble pressing through the sole of her sandals. She stirred, and at once his arms tightened. Let me go, Sheftu. I'll never let you go. Never. He turned his head against hers, brushing his lips over her hair, her ear, across her cheek. I love you, Mara. Oh, Amun, I would that were true, she whispered. It is true. For a moment of pure happiness, she closed her eyes and let herself believe it. Surely he meant it. Aye, he meant it tonight. He had kissed her. He needed her tonight. But tomorrow? She knew quite well how these things turned out. She opened her eyes. Impossible, she said bluntly. You are a great noble, a lord of Egypt. None of that matters, not after 5 hours in the dark. He pushed her away, enough to look at her, but kept tight hold of her arms. I'm not speaking lightly. Do you understand? By tomorrow morning you'll forget you spoke at all. His voice roughened. I'll not forget. I know what I want, Lotus-eyed one. I'm weary of dueling with you. You'll share my life as long as it lasts, and such as it is. Is that clear enough? Quite clear. But you must be mad. Tomorrow. He seized her chin between thumb and finger and twisted her face up to him. Be quiet, he whispered. He kissed her, at first gently, then again not at all gently, and she gave herself up to it. Never mind tomorrow, she forgot, or she thought. Never mind anything. She was building dreams like palaces. Sheftu loosed her abruptly and dropped both arms to his sides, moving away a step. Little one, this must stop. He drew a deep, irregular breath. I still must show myself inside there, lest they begin to mourn me as dead, and you must get back to your boat, man. Aye, said Mara shakily. The dreams were still there, turret on airy turret. I hope he waited for me. Did you see Nakonk? Before I came here, he's already half off down the river with his passengers. As to the rest of it, Sheftu moved closer, lowering his voice. You must seek audience with the prince tomorrow. Aye, Sheftu. Tell him all's well. The door's plastered over and sealed as we found it, and the stones rolled back into place. The tomb has a second occupant now. But it has what? He met her eyes in silence, and she shivered. No matter, he said quietly. Mention none of that. Not about the torch or any problems. It's done and finished. I want only to forget it. Tell him the gods hidden, safe at hand to pay our promises when the time comes. Aye, and tell him Count Kepper is one of us. I talked to him, Osiris. It was only this afternoon. It seems a year ago. Aye, Sheftu, how tired you must be. She reached out impulsively. You'll seek your couch soon? Never fear. He smiled, folding his hand over hers and pressing it tight, then tighter. Mara, he whispered. Suddenly his face changed. He opened his hand and looked down at her finger. Too late. She was aware of the hard shape of the ring, as if it were a circlet of fire burning into her flesh. She could no more prevent her involuntary attempt to jerk away than she could break the iron grasp which suddenly held her. She stood, paralyzed, as he slowly raised his eyes to hers. He was the dangerous Sheftu of old who stood there now. I am touched, he said softly, that you should treasure this little keepsake for so long. You're angry, she breathed. Oh, Sheftu, I should have told you long ago. The old man in Abydos would take naught for helping me, but I was afraid if I told you, you would make me give it back. Thanks be to the gods. Her voice was reasonably steady, for all she was giddy with fear. It was stupid of me, perhaps wicked. Here, take it, Sheftu. Nay, please. He was silent a moment, then gently loosed her hand. Keep it as a token of my esteem. Mara tried to smile. Why did he stand there so still, just looking at her? He was thinking. Thinking what? She could never tell anything from that impenetrable face. I will, if you're certain you wish it. It has brought me luck all day. I think it bears a powerful charm. I wore it tonight to bring you back safe, and it may be that I owe my life to it? He finished smoothly. Aye, perhaps you're right, little one, perhaps I do. He straightened, deliberately relaxed, and smiled, warmly, intimately, as only he could smile. I must leave you, lotus-eyed one, though tonight I confess I am especially loath to. Be here tomorrow, as soon after nightfall as you are able. It cannot be too soon for me. How much of that was irony? He gave her no chance to find out, for he turned quickly, strode across the courtyard, and through the inner door. Mara stood motionless where he had left her. The moon inched imperceptibly higher in the night sky, and a little breeze sprang up to stir a fold of her sleeve. She shivered. Suddenly, she tore the ring from her finger and hurled it with all her strength across the courtyard. Whirling, she started blindly for the gate, then slowed, then stopped. After a moment, she turned back, searched carefully for the ring, and found it at last. A guttersnipe did not fling away a fortune. even to satisfy the wildest disappointment. Such gestures were for the rich and secure, whose airy palaces were real. Tucking the ring into her sash, she hurried out of the courtyard and along the dark and evil streets to the river. I am secure, she told herself. He believed me. Surely all is well. Could he have smiled like that if it were not? Aye, he could, and she knew it. That's the end of chapter 19. Chapter 20 is the beginning of part 6. Part 6 is called The Trap. Chapter 20 is called The Bait. The first word is the, and you'll have to come back tomorrow to find out what happens. So, and I just lost my place, so we might have to start the whole book over again. Okay, I found it. So does anybody know, besides Mom, why he wasn't especially happy that she still had that ring? Kimmy? Mom?
Because he gave it to her to pay somebody to do her up so that she could look like she was an interpreter. Instead, she's
Like
a
she was
double
a
agent.
priest, the priest's daughter.
The priest's daughter, yeah. So instead, she kept it because she already made a deal with what's his face,
Nahora or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the evil guy.
Yeah, but she did pay the guy, but she paid the guy with Nahora's
Right.
golden scarab that he gave her.
And she kept the money, or
She kept the
ring.
the
because
electrum
she's
ring.
been in love with
Well,
Sheftu, like since.
Not to mention that ring was worth probably honestly,
Yeah, and like
honestly,
she got her snipe.
that one ring is probably worth like 10 years salary for, a middle class Egyptian.
Yes.
So, like, it's like a seriously valuable thing. So, all right. So
good night, everybody.
good night, everybody.
Kimmy.
Good night, Rebecca.